All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Morgan Crossman, and welcome to our July State Advisory Council meeting. I am the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures, which is Vermont's Early Childhood State Advisory Council, as well as Vermont's Early Childhood Data and Policy Center. We have, in true BBF fashion, a very packed SAC agenda for today's meeting. We are going to learn about family leadership and advisement at the state and national level. We are going to review and endorse the 2023 to 2028 Building Bright Futures Strategic Plan, not to be confused with the VCAP, our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan, but our organizational strategic plan. And we will learn about Act 76, which was formerly H217, from our agency leaders, and hear a little bit about implementation, but also discuss as a board, some of those implications on the early childhood system and have the opportunity to ask some questions. And as always, this meeting and this forum is used as a public way to build, alignment and collaboration across our regional councils, our state advisory council, and our Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees. So I'd like to ask everybody who's on the meeting today to do an introduction via our chat bar. And if you are not on the State Advisory Council, I'm going to ask you after our mindful moment to turn off your cameras and ask all of our SAC members that are joining to please keep your video on. And there will be a point later in the meeting where we'll ask you all to turn your videos back on. But at least for the business portion of the meeting, we want our SAC members to be able to see each other, and we'll ask folks to turn off their cameras. I'm going to turn it over to Beth for our mindful moment.
Thanks, Morgan. We have a practice of opening our SAC meetings with a mindful moment, and would like to lead us through what some call box breathing. So invite you to sit up straight in your chair. You can turn off your screen if you'd like. Plant your feet on the ground. Just give you a moment to center, and then you're going to inhale for 3 counts. Hold your breath for 3, and then exhale for 3. And pause. You can go through this one more time on your own schedule. So inhale for 3 counts. Hold for 3, exhale for 3, and hold for 3. Thank you. SAC members, you're invited to show us your beautiful faces, and I'm going to turn this over to Flor Diaz-Smith, who's our private co-chair, who's going to lead us through our SAC business.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Flor Diaz-Smith, and I serve on behalf of the Vermont School Boards Association, and I'm the private co-chair, just as Beth just said. We're going to invite all of our State Advisory Council members to introduce themselves via roll call, and I will start with our public partners. I'm just going to say your name and let you introduce yourself, okay? Just share your department too, so we don't do it double. Heather Boucher. DC, no. So Agency of Education, not here. Okay. Sheila Livingston from the Agency of Human Services. Okay. Janet from Child Development Division. I think I saw you here, Janet.
Yeah. Hi there, Janet McLaughlin, Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Children and Families, overseeing the Child Development Division. And Secretary Boucher is planning to join us, but I think she can't join until 2:30.
Great, thanks for letting us know. Okay, Jessica Vintner from the Agency of Commerce.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Vintner with the Agency of Commerce. I'm the Legislative Director and Agencies Rep.
And Susanna, I see you here. You want to introduce yourself? Susanna Davis.
Hi, everybody. Susanna Davis, Racial Equity Director for the state.
Okay. And now I'm going to move into our legislators. Senator Ruth Hardy, Representative. Oh, there. Are you there?
No, she couldn't make it, I was going to say.
Okay. Okay. Just in Representative Brumsted, go ahead. Do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
I'm state representative from Shelburne and also the vice chair of the House Human Services Committee.
Welcome. Okay, now I'm going to move to our partners, our large. Eddie, I see you there. Eddie Gale.
Hi, Eddie Gale with the A.D. Henderson Foundation.
Carol Long.
Carol Langodden, representing Parent Child
Oh,
Center.
sorry.
That's okay.
I made a note. Sharon Harrington.
Hi, everyone. Sharon Harrington, Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children, Executive Director.
Christy Stetson. You might be in my next screen. I don't see you. Alexis Duquette, Parent Representative. Here. Libby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Libby Dalian. I'm a parent representative and I live in Winooski.
Thank you. Dr. Ashley Miller. Okay, Dr. Ashley Miller from South Royalton Health Center. Here. Paul Dragon. Mike Ray from the Vermont Principals Association. Mike might be running a little late. Again, we have our two non-voting members. Akira Radke, are you here, Akira? Kendall Smith. Kendall Smith from the governor's office, non-voting member. Okay, I don't see him here. Okay, so we also have a few members that have sent their regrets. My co-chair, Elisa Stalberg, couldn't be here with us today. Becca Webb couldn't be with us today. Dimitri, Renee, Cheryl, and Ruth. I actually called Ruth and she had said that she couldn't be here. I got it a little late today.
And
Okay.
one more is, I think Heather, did we call Heather Wilcoxon? I see that she's here.
Heather. Oh, there you are.
Hi, Heather Wilcoxon, the Assistant Children's Division Director with HCRS. Thank you.
Welcome, Heather. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you to vote on the minutes. Have everybody had a chance to read the minutes? I'm looking for a motion to accept the May 2023 minutes.
I so move.
Thank you, Heather. A second?
I'll second. Eddie.
Thank you, Eddie. All those in favor? First, well, any discussion first? I'm jumping quickly to go. I feel I did the roll call a little slow. So any discussion, any amendments to the meetings? No, to the minutes? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. As you can see. All right, I think we have majority. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Having none, the minutes have passed. And I'm now going to give it to Morgan for the next piece of business. And we'll talk in a little bit.
Hi, Flora. I'm going to share a little bit about our strategic plan. So we're going to bring up our slide share. So Building Bright Futures develops a dynamic strategic plan for the organization. And as Morgan said, this is different from the VCAP, right? This is what many nonprofits develop, which is a multi-year strategic plan that guides the organization's priorities. We are just finishing up a 2-year strategic plan, and this had been a 2-year strategic plan based to be in compliance with our state allocation that was administered by the Child Development Division. And it's no longer the case that we are kind of committed to a 2-year plan. And so we decided to transition to a 5-year plan. That felt like it was a more appropriate period of time to achieve the goals outlined in the strategic plan. So that's just a little bit about what we are bringing to the council for endorsement today. And I am not going to go through every piece of the strategic plan. We can put the document link in the chat. I'm going to share some really high level points. Many of you know our mission to improve the well-being of each and every child and family in Vermont by using evidence to inform policy and bringing voices together to discuss critical challenges and problem solve. We are functioning for FY24, a budget of about 3.9 million. That is nearly double from what our normal operations are, which is more like 1.3, 1.4 million. And we are also transitioning as a staff from a team of about 11 to a team of 17. So we're in a bit of a very strategic growth moment, in part because of the VIPB5 grant, the preschool development grant, as we sometimes call it. We have, in terms of facilities, we have staff working all across the state, and then we also maintain a central office in Williston. So that's just a little bit of our facilities. Our infrastructure is largely about our people, our human services. So just some successes for over the last 2 years that we are really, really proud to share with you. The first is that in this last strategic plan that went from 2021 to 23, one of the goals was to advise, to kind of live into our charge under state statute to advise the governor, administration, and General Assembly using the most up-to-date, high-quality information and data on child and family well-being and the early childhood system. And one success is that we are really proud to have provided advisement 75 times in FY23 to a range of leaders in our state. And more important than the number of advisements and advising opportunities is that this really represents a trusted relationships that we have built between leadership of BBF and members of the General Assembly, Governor's Office, administration, and federal delegation. It is really because of these relationships and people reaching out to us as well as us reaching out to them, which allows BBF to kind of fulfill our charge as a result of kind of calling attention to the challenges, errors, or emerging issues that we see in the early childhood system and really utilizing the whole network. So that's one success we want to celebrate with you. One of the other goals that we set out for the last strategic plan was to strengthen and align the BBF network infrastructure to meet requirements under Title 33, Chapter 46. And again, this is something that we've worked really hard to do. We have, a network of regional councils, the VCAP committees, the State Advisory Council, and then all of our partners that are part of the network. And one of the charges that we under state statute is to be able to respond to some of these emerging needs. And sometimes we are responding by kind of elevating those gaps and needs up through our network to policymakers. And sometimes we're responding to those issues at a regional level. And one of the things that we established in the last few years was the Vermont Early Childhood Fund. And this fund was established to respond to regional needs identified by regional councils and awarded $200,000 over the last 2 years, or about 14 different grants. And VECF allows us to both respond to needs of families and communities, and it also builds alignment across the BBF network. So that is a huge celebration, and we are continuing to build that program. The third goal that we identified in the last years was to strengthen and maintain BBF's organizational effectiveness. As I shared, we have a team, now a growing team, and are thrilled with our kind of organizational stability and resilience over the last couple of years, which is as we know, there's been a lot going on, especially with the pandemic and impacts of kind of changes to federal grants. But we've really invested in our systems internally. And these are not necessarily things that you as partners may see. Those serving on the executive committee certainly hear about these changes and the strategies that we've used. But just to share very briefly, we've really prioritized employee retention through expanded compensation and benefits. One thing that we set out to do was to add a retirement benefit for employees, and we did this for the first time in BBF's history, and that felt really good. I joined the organization in 2014, and knowing that we are offering staff retirement benefit, I think is really significant and needed. We have also developed a multi-year budget and built a staffing model based on sustainable and realistic funding projections. In addition, we prioritized, as I shared, kind of the retention and increasing benefits and compensation to staff. So we appreciate the work that our team is doing. We are spread across the state and felt like those investments were needed. So a few celebrations, and we can move to the next slide as we move into the next strategic plan. So this next organization strategic plan will run from 2023 to 2028. We are making that shift for 5 years. And again, to very, very high level that our first goal is kind of around network and data informed policy advisement. And we have kind of two priorities there. To maintain and utilize data and policy products and mechanisms for advisement. We do that in all different ways that you all have heard quite a bit about, as well as to utilize the BBF network to gather stakeholder feedback to maximize engagement and promote data-driven decision-making and policymaking. These, as you can imagine, that these goals are largely about what you see BBF doing, fulfilling our charge that is in state statute. And in the strategic plan, if you look at that document, you can see kind of our specific strategies. The next goal is more around the internal operations, around organizational and fiscal stability. We are prioritizing maintaining the organization's fiscal stability through diverse funding sources. This is something that we've been working very hard to not be reliant on the next federal grant, but to really be actively seeking both private and public funding sources. And, as we increased our state allocation in the last couple of years, that has been incredibly helpful and necessary. And then the other piece is to utilize the BBF network to gather stakeholder feedback and maximize engagement. So that is like the really brief snapshot of our strategic plan. And we are, continue to invest in. We can maybe pause the screen share while we take a vote. I can take any questions from the SAC if there are any other, and then we can move to a vote.
Thank you, Beth. Are there any questions from any of our members here? Any questions? You were very clear, Beth. Thank you for sending the advanced materials too. I'm sure once those are, we will have more questions for you, but thank you. I'm going to call, can someone make a motion to endorse the 2023-2028 Building Bright Futures Organizational Strategic Plan?
Sure, I'll make the motion to endorse the.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Carol. I'm voting. Got it. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All right. Any opposed? Any abstain? Hearing none, the strategic plan has passed. And back to you.
Thank you all very much. We are going to transition from our business that we were able to move through fairly quickly, which is good. We have a full agenda. I'm going to hand this over. I don't know if I'm handing it to Anna or Morgan to talk about family engagement.
Thank you, Beth. So perfect. Thanks, Kate. So Jen Fortman and I are going to share a little bit more about recent family leadership work at BBF. In a moment, Jen will provide a brief overview of the 2022 Family Needs Assessment that many of you have heard about at this point, or were potentially able to join our virtual briefing a while back. If not, we will provide a kind of a mini version of that, or abbreviated version of that today. And we're also really excited to share a little bit more about our recent experience attending federal meetings in Maryland and DC. So I'm just going to provide some brief background and then really hand it over to Jen, who's the expert on all of this. So this work is supported by both our VIP3 project, a federal grant through HRSA, as well as the preschool development grant. Under both projects, the BBF team aims to increase and expand opportunities for professional development and leadership training for family leaders such as Jen. The experience that Jen will share about today, which includes leading a project, in this case, the Early Childhood Family Needs Assessment, from conception all the way to sharing about the final results of this project with our federal delegation in DC, is an example of what these opportunities can look like at the highest level. So we're really kind of excited to share more about what that work looks like in action. Jen, I'll hand things right over to you.
Hi all, and thank you, Anna, for that introduction. My name is Jen Fortman. I am a mom of 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter and live in Hyde Park. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all at the State Advisory Council, sharing my experience as a parent co-chair for BBF's Families and Communities Committee, being a member of BBF's COAT, so Child Outcomes Accountability Team, and the parent lead on the federal VIP3 grant that Anna just mentioned, and that I'll discuss a little further in this presentation. That was used to fund this Family Needs Assessment project and some of the work that the Families and Communities Committee does. And just by being here, you all are providing an opportunity for family leaders such as myself to have a voice in the early childhood system decision-making process. And I don't think I need to explain to this group in particular just how important family engagement and family voices are in this line of work. So thank you again for being here and for this opportunity for me to speak. Next slide, please. The creation of the Family Needs Assessment is it's a reflection of the work of the Families and Communities Committee. And so the FCC is one of 7 Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan committees, the VCAP committees, under the umbrella of this SAC group. And as you know, the VCAP committee works towards 4 goals. And the goal our committee is focused on, goal 2, that families and communities play a leading role in children's well-being. The creation and implementation of this 2022 Family Needs Assessment was led by myself, Sarah Morrison, who's the other parent co-chair of the Families and Communities Committee, and was supported by you all here at the State Advisory Council, along with other organizations from Vermont's early childhood system. So this survey was designed throughout the spring and summer of 2022 with the intention of being able to conduct the same or a similar survey regularly in order to be able to compare and help identify strengths and challenges families face throughout the state of Vermont. We collected quantitative and qualitative data in this survey, and part of this assessment, respondents had 3 opportunities to provide in-depth feedback about services and supports they were asked about by writing in comments about their specific experiences. Next slide, please. So once the survey creation was completed, 14 parent ambassadors were recruited from around the state and trained remotely by the FCC leadership team, including myself and Sarah, to share the survey and collect responses between August 15th and October 15th of 22. The survey was promoted on social media, hanging flyers with QR code links to SurveyMonkey, just in popular community spaces. Folks were delivering paper copies of the survey to harder reach communities and more. Most responses were submitted electronically through SurveyMonkey, though the paper version was made available for circumstances in which it was preferable or required for those without access to broadband internet or devices. And all survey responses were anonymous. Parent ambassadors, as I mentioned, were supported by Sarah and I through the duration of the project. Once the survey was closed, all the parent ambassadors that were hired, along with all families who completed the survey, were invited to join the Families and Communities Committee and hopes to keep connecting with those families from around the state. Then over the next 6 months, the data team at BBF analyzed and summarized the both qualitative and quantitative data and found 7 recurring themes from individual responses. And with collaboration between BBF and community partners, this resulted in 4 policy considerations. Next slide, please. And those 4 policy considerations are to elevate and align Vermont's strategies to inform and connect families to resources, review national best practices to reduce administrative burden and promote equity of access to necessities such as food, diapers, formula, etc. To support the implementation of clear guidance on the full scope of kindergarten transitions. And 4, to pursue integration of mental health services throughout Vermont's early childhood system that engages ease of access for families with young children. Next slide, please. So this project and a lot of the work the Families and Communities Committee is doing is funded by the Vermont Integration Prenatal to Age 3, so the VIP3 grant through HRSA, who's the Health Resources and Services Administration. And as many of you are aware, this 5-year early childhood comprehensive systems grant ending in July 2026 is led by the Vermont Department of Health, FCH team, and is partnering with BBF to support building upon and strengthening system integration and equity lens within Vermont's early childhood system. And as we are focusing on right now, family leadership work. Last month in June, Morgan Crossman, Anna Brulette, and myself attended this 2-day annual conference in Maryland. You can see a picture of us standing outside of the HRSA building there. And as a parent leader, it was such an honor and a privilege to travel to DC alongside Morgan and Anna, representing Vermont, and in particular, the parent members of the FCC and all families who participated in this assessment. We brought copies of the report and shared them around with attendees from states all over the country. Just being able to connect with other states, both sharing Vermont's work and hearing the work of others, was very refreshing and just such an incredible opportunity for not only myself as a parent, but Vermont as a whole. It was just very empowering leaving the conference in Maryland when we then traveled to DC to meet with the Vermont federal House and Senate delegation teams. And here are some photos of us in those 2 meetings in outside buildings. So these 2 meetings was both the House delegation and Senate delegation were 2 additional opportunities for the results of the family needs assessment to be heard. It's very refreshing and, again, empowering knowing the voices of Vermont families are being heard at such a high level. Overall, it was such a cool and awesome experience. Now I'm gonna pass this along to Anna to talk a bit more about it.
Thanks, Jen. You did such a great job. I'll just do a little bit of summarizing, and then I think we'll have plenty of time to take questions if folks have any. But like Jen shared, it was a great opportunity for our team to be in DC, to be elevating the work that's been done by our family leaders, including Jen and Sarah. It was a great opportunity to both elevate the work of this family needs assessment and the results and the policy considerations that Jen walked us through. But it was also just a great chance to talk about and kind of show off the family leadership progress that Vermont has made, and to connect with other states doing that work and to learn from them as well. It's also just a powerful display of Vermont leading the way when it comes to data-informed decision-making, as well as policy making in partnership with families. And I can say that it was a really proud moment for me to see folks walking around this federal meeting with copies of our early childhood family needs assessment that Jen was doing such a great job handing out left and right. And everywhere I looked, someone had a copy and was eager to talk about it with me and to share the work that they were doing as well. So we're thrilled to kind of elevate this further to you all, and really are excited to hopefully make future opportunities at the national level, state level, more local level as well, available to our family leaders through these exciting federal grant opportunities. So I will pause there, and we can bring the screen share down, Kate, and we can take any questions from folks. And non-SAC folks, you're also welcome to turn your cameras back on.
Anna, I just want to share one other reflection with the group, which is that not only were people carrying around the needs assessment, but they were carrying around the plain language summary, and they would come up to each of us just randomly and say, "You're from Vermont. We saw this. We can understand what you did and what it is and what it means. And we need to do this. And this is amazing." So another initiative and something that our Families and Communities Committee has been really focused on and prioritizing is having those plain language summaries so that we are able to disseminate this work in a really meaningful way. And our national partners were really excited about that as well.
Thank you, Morgan. Libby, I see your hand. Go for it.
Sure. Lower my hand. Yeah, this is really interesting, and thank you for sharing and presenting about it. I don't have a question, but more of a suggestion, and this might already be in the works. But I noticed this version was just in English, and I was going to suggest for the next iteration, there's some great organizations in the Winooski and Burlington area that could probably help with translations and getting the survey out within their networks.
Thank you, Libby. To Morgan's point, this is certainly one of our goals, accessibility on all fronts. And to your point, non-English speakers are certainly part of that list. And certainly our next iteration, we already have a number of organizations in mind, but would also love to hear from you at another point who you would recommend as well, and definitely have funding and capacity now in a different, exciting way under the preschool development grant to support doing a better job with all of that. So really appreciate that point. Other questions or comments? Any other questions for Jen about her experience and what it meant? Laura.
I was just going to say to Jen, thank you for, for doing it and for being brave and putting yourself in that position. It's not an easy thing to do. And thank you to our leaders of Building Bright Futures for, building up leaders and everything and sharing, the stage with others so that, you hear from the folks right on the ground. So that is really amazing. So it's just thank you.
Thank you.
Anna and Jen, one of the other reflections that I would share on this experience is that this is the second time that we have traveled as a state to DC with a family leader, some of our state agency leaders and members of our team at Building Bright Futures, and really seeing the value in having this interdisciplinary group come together that includes this partnership with families to be able to talk with the delegation to be able to talk with other states about what it truly means to partner with families, what it means to partner with state government to do this work well, what it means to truly, think about a comprehensive early childhood system. And I've been so incredibly impressed with the way that our family leaders show up in this space. They are phenomenally confident in talking with our delegation and actually showing them the importance of spending time with people that are coming to DC and coming from the states. And I think one thing that's really important to know is people should be going and talking with the federal delegation. When you are in DC, you should be talking with the federal delegation staff in Vermont to be elevating needs and challenges and opportunities. So I just wanted to say thank you to Jen, but also to some of our state agency leaders who have come with us, some of our other family leads. I know Dr. Valerie Wood is on the call. She came with us to meet with our federal delegation last time as well. It was a really important opportunity to, again, really model what it means to be partnering in this work with families, with communities, and to be able to elevate data so that they can be informing decisions at the highest level, not just in the state of Vermont, but on the federal level. So I'm so proud of our family leads, of all of the partners that are coming with us and speaking and being vulnerable on that national stage, and that we're truly holding the values and the needs and challenges of kids and families on the ground.
Okay, not seeing any more questions or hands. I think, Morgan, I'll hand it back to you.
All right. I'm not sure if Dr. Boucher is in the virtual building yet, but I have a couple of opening remarks and we will watch for her because we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which never happens. So we're going to transition to talking about Act 76, formerly H217. And this is titled an act relating to childcare and early childhood education. So for today's State Advisory Council meeting, we felt like it was a really important opportunity to invite our state agencies that are playing a very significant role in implementation related to this new law. So we've invited Janet McLaughlin, who's the Deputy Commissioner for the Child Development Division at DCF. I'm seeing your note, Jana, thank you. And then Dr. Heather Boucher, who is the Acting Secretary for the Agency of Education, to talk about their roles and responsibilities as well as priorities within this piece, or within, not even this piece of legislation, within this law, as well as their strategy and timelines. And before I turn it over to them, and I'm going to ask a member of my team who is in our facilitators agenda to please share the blog that we disseminated back in June about the role the BBF network played related to this piece of legislation. So the link is right in that section of the agenda. If someone's able to go grab it and put it in the chat for me. But as Beth mentioned, related to one of the successes in our strategic plan earlier on, BBF plays a significant advisement role for the state of Vermont. So when we say we've advised lawmakers, the legislature, legislative staff, the Joint Fiscal Office, and the administration over 75 times, we're looking at all of the different one-on-one phone calls, the opportunities where we are meeting with the different teams, or we're meeting with legislative leaders to help support their understanding of different components of how a decision they plan to make or might make impacts kids and families, or helping them think critically about the data that we have, or the family voice, or the data that came from a survey that we've gathered, or the family needs assessment, and really helping them think through how they can use that information to create change in a law, in their program, in their practice, something like that. So, that advisement happening over 75 times this year is significantly more than we've seen in any other legislative session. And in terms of both written and verbal testimony to multiple committees, we actually did formal testimony 13 times over this session. So just wanting to say to you all, we couldn't do that work without our full network, without our regional councils, without the strategic plan committees, without the SAC. being able to elevate the needs, the challenges, and opportunities. So we're really proud of our work to be able to elevate family voice and community voice and partners' perspectives alongside data and national best practice to inform legislation each year. And I also want to do a quick shout out to the Building Bright Futures team. I'm so proud of the work that our team has done over the last year related to this session and the advisement charge within our statute. It is incredibly powerful. We are grateful to each of you in the role that you play. Whether it is convening partners at some level of our network, whether it is collecting, compiling, or elevating the most up-to-date, high-quality data to inform decision-making, whether it's rapid information gathering when we do a quick blast to our network to say, hey, here's a topic, we want your feedback right away, and people are responding to those. Whether it's facilitating robust discussions around systems or around opportunities for kids and families. So thank you to the BBF team, and thank you to the BBF network through each level. It's an incredible 450 person network that has so many different meaningful ways of creating change in the system. Specific to Act 76, BBF has a significant role to play within this piece of legislation. And I know you're going to hear from Janet and Heather in a little bit about the big, overall perspective of the bill and what the intent is and how they are working to create change in the system. Building Bright Futures was written into this legislation to support and promote stakeholder engagement, to provide technical assistance to the administration, in a ton of work around monitoring and accountability related to how we are thinking about implementing this bill. As we think about accountability and monitoring, we're charged as a network, and specifically in supporting this broad network, to collectively define and measure success in this system and to monitor all of the critical transitions over the course of the next forever years. But really, as we're thinking about implementation of this bill, what does it mean from a process standpoint? How do we know if we are creating change? How do we know if we're hitting each of our respective goals? And how do we look at that over time? Not just in year 1, year 3, year 5, but how are we looking at systems change? And really thinking about how we're monitoring this piece of legislation alongside the entire early childhood system. And so over the course of the next few months, you can be engaged in meetings where we are talking about how we are monitoring the system. We're starting with meeting with our agency leaders as well as key partners over the course of the next few months to initiate that process. And we will also be bringing that to our data and evaluation committee once we have a more formalized plan. And again, making sure that our legislative leaders are a part of that process as well, because we really need system-wide buy-in to create the change that we want to see in the system. And we are seeing some incredible leadership on behalf of our agencies right now in stepping up and showing us the way and how to do that well. But it really is going to take all of us to implement this bill well, to be able to monitor it and understand what's working well and what isn't, and how we shift as we move. So what I will say related to this bill is I'm incredibly proud that the legislature and the administration and the governor's office understand the role of Building Bright Futures in supporting data-driven decision-making and accountability in the system, and that it gives us the opportunity to continue to build their capacity in very strategic areas. So really excited for that body of work over the next many years. But really excited to have Janet and Heather with us today to hear about this bill and how they are prioritizing and strategizing in this moment. So Janet, I again am not seeing Heather yet, but I'll kick it to you.
Yeah.
And we can start there.
Yeah, Heather had said you could join at 2:30. So I assume that's about when we'll see her, but I am happy to cover the childcare specific pieces of implementation for Act 76 in advance, and just again happy to be with all of you. I know everybody played an important role in getting us to this point with Act 76, and we are, as people may remember, I stepped into my role at the Department of Children and Families, overseeing the Child Development Division, the beginning of March. So it was right as like the bill was like in getting close to being voted on in the Senate. So I sort of like jumped in and sort of tried to figure out things from there. But so it's been definitely sort of a wild ride, but we are, I'm excited to tell you about it. We did, as the Child Development Division, we did do a webinar last Tuesday, a couple of webinars that offer a slightly longer explanation of what everything that's or not everything, most of the things in the bill, and how that audience for that was specifically for childcare programs at that moment, recognizing that a lot of the early changes are related to the systems that are seen and felt sort of on the childcare program side, and some of the changes that more directly impact families, or I don't know, that might require action from families to be able to be accessed. Those are happening a little bit later. So we focused first on the audience that again will very quickly see and feel some of the differences. So I can make sure that people have that. We also have developed a pretty detailed summary document and status chart that we're planning to keep updated monthly, so that if you have a question about a certain piece of it, you're always welcome to ask, but you can also go onto our website and find that chart and be like, hey, what is happening with enrollment policies? And you can be like, aha, they're planning to convene a committee on this, in September on this, and supposed to change by January. And you can get some of those details, hopefully in a way that's slightly more, it's still very detailed, but slightly more accessible than the 77 pages of legislation. So I also, I will get to the top point, but I just thought I would share quickly some updates related to flood response. For the Child Development Division, we have been trying to understand and assess what the impact has been on childcare programs across the state. As with everything, right, it's been incredibly variable, right? We're from no impacts to like needing to close for a day to like not being, never being sure you can reopen in that location again. And so the numbers that in terms of the data that we've collected by our licensing team, right, who's in touch, has a caseload of every program around the country and around the state, and are in touch with them, is that we've identified about 32 programs that had an impact, and that impact could have been just being closed for a couple of days because the roads people couldn't get there, or they need to be closed for 4 days because with the boil water order it was complicated. But we heard from 32 that had to close for basically at least a day because of the impact of the storms. 13 that had damage, and some of that was minor, and some of that is really significant. And then right now we have there's 5 programs that have needed a variance to be able to move to a different location to be able to offer services. So there are, and of those 3 of them, the variances are through, they're back up and running. And 2 of them, one thinks will be up and running in their new location actually this week, and then other one, it'll probably be August, and that was a family childcare provider. And I think it's also interesting to note that it looks like the alternative locations for all of these programs is their local elementary school. So the fact that this happened in the summer meant that they've been able to rely upon those community partnerships to move to a school space that wasn't being utilized right now. So I just thought I would give people that update. So because the impact appears to be, again, like it's a very specific number of programs, our intention is to just do customized support and technical assistance and for those programs, and we're not necessarily going to do like big webinars on flood response when we feel like it's maybe 15 programs that need help on that, or there's these 5 that we're really going to work intensely with because they're going to need support on their locations. That can include some of the support related to accessing the loans or grants. And then we also are having the conversation. I mean, Vermont as a state is having the conversation about how can we support small businesses and nonprofits with not just loans. And everybody, and like that's a big question that I think a lot of people have on their minds. And so we're a part of that conversation and making sure that childcare programs and whether they're early childhood or after school programs are part of that conversation and consideration. So I just thought that might be useful. I know that Heather has information on some of the impacts on schools, and that AOE had been doing its own sort of assessment on that as well. But just so people know that that's what I think we're dealing. That's my best guess right now, or my best sense right now of what we're dealing with in terms of the impacts from the floods. There's a couple other programs that did have some damage that were closed, that are closed during the summer. And so I don't have an update from them on how significant they, if they felt like they were going to need a variance by the time it gets to fall. I think everybody's hoping not. So does anybody have any questions for me on that piece of it? Okay, great. Then I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides to share with you. It's kind of like a just the facts version of this. And is not, so sorry, I've got managing. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Okay, so essentially, as the DCF has sort of dived into this bill and our role in implementing it, we have identified that there's sort of 5 major buckets of work that are identified within the legislation. So this order does not necessarily follow the order of the legislation. That's its own, there's all separate logic to that. And we have organized it in a way that we think is both hopefully will feel relevant to our programs and partners and families, as well as for us, for the workload that we need to take on to implement. So the categories that we'd identified, were changes to the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, some changes that need to be reflected in our child care licensing standards, some elements related to accountability and to administration. And so Morgan already started to touch on those. And then changes that are related to pre-kindergarten. Actually, should probably change that slide. It's not necessarily related to UPK, but we'll get to that point. And then the reports and presentations that were requested. So that is, and so then today, I'm happy to go through any of these things, but I was going to focus on childcare financial assistance, and then with Heather, we were going to talk about the changes related to pre-kindergarten or the work related to pre-kindergarten that's in the bill, and then wanted to touch briefly on accountability administration. But so that's the plan. In terms of the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, there were major changes in terms of the way that the amount that the state pays to programs who are offering support to children who qualify for child care financial assistance, as well as some changes to the eligibility for families. In terms of the changes on what I sort of call the rate side of things, we have switched to sort of more simplified rate structure and also increased the base rates. In order to, let's see, we eliminated the stars stars was eliminated as a criteria for the rate scale for programs, that stars as the quality measure. And we did that because we wanted to, well, let's see, the bill does that. It was a change that was requested, that was both requested by the administration and by the governor. And it was also something that the legislature had built into their original draft of the bill as well. So it's something we all agreed on, making this change for equity purposes, because we wanted to make sure that all families received the same benefit from the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, sort of no matter what program they attended, knowing especially that programs have limited options. And our goal is to make sure that all programs have the resources that they need to offer the high quality care there that they want to be able to offer. So those two things were separated. So it's a simpler schedule. And then now the rates are higher. The rate is set at what had been the 5-star rate last fiscal year, but we sort of don't even talk about that anymore because now the rates aren't tied to stars anymore. There's no stars rate. There's just a new higher base rate. And my next slide will give you what those are. And then as we get to next year, you'll see that we are going to pay all programs at what we're calling the Child Care Financial Assistance state rates. Before, the state would pay the program's regular and customary rate or our capped rate, whichever one was lower. And now the state is just going to pay the amount that we've decided we want to pay for this service without comparing to a program's rate. So it doesn't. So there's that change, and the rates are going to increase significantly. And they'll be for all programs in January, and then again for family child care programs in July. So this is what those new rates will look like. So we have already implemented the simplified rate structure with the increased cap rates. That started July 2nd. That was the start of the first sort of CCFIP service period in this fiscal year. And the first payments at those increased rates went out last week. So it was a big effort by our team that works on data and that works on the Child Care Financial Assistance Program to get that all set up and run smoothly. You have to do sort of what they call like a mass redetermination of benefits. But the first big hurdle, I think, has been successfully. What do you do to hurdles? You jump them. Jumped. Cleared. That's what it is. Okay. So this is where we're heading, which is going to feel very different for many programs. Then the expansion of eligibility will start kicking in next fiscal year, and that is when we will. And so we're going to be working this fall and into early next year to make sure that our materials for families, like our easy to understand, and that these families do know that they are going to become eligible for this over time and doing outreach. But that's the point at which we're going to do more of the family outreach, would be in the beginning of 2024, knowing that this is coming. So you can see currently eligibility is at 350% of the federal poverty level. So as of next April, it will increase to 400%. There will also be a more generous payment on behalf of families that have income between 150 and 175% of the federal poverty level starting in April. By next July, we anticipate being able to offer CCFAP to children who were previously excluded due to their citizenship status. We do have ways that we include refugees and other people that already right now, but this is sort of a specific category of children. And then by next October 2024, the income eligibility would increase to 575% of the federal poverty level, which will include the majority of families that are accessing childcare. Will certainly be income eligible for the program. You still do need to have a service need, but work, school, another reason sort of in your family's life that you need to access childcare. And then we are also in the process of redoing the contracts for our community childcare support agencies to have increased resources starting this year, so that they can support more families being able to have access to service. There's going to be more and more people that need to have their eligibility determinations done. And And then we have, in terms of additional supports, we have readiness payments is another big, is sort of like, again, is the next big hurdle for us to clear. So this is $20 million that was appropriated by the legislature. And it is to specifically for programs that accept or are planning to accept childcare financial assistance to sort of get them ready for this new expanded system. So to help them in terms of covering costs right now, make sure there's not like a contraction in the market coming, right now while we're trying to get the resources to support a broader CCFAP program are getting into place. So this is will be a formula based, so it's not going to be competitive, sort of similar to what we did for the ARPA stabilization funds. And we have a survey out to programs right now asking them for their input, and we anticipate rolling out applications in August, and that fingers crossed payments will start rolling out in September. So that is a significant resource that's going to be in the hands of programs. And then looking beyond that, there is a intention to have a $10 million quality after incentive program for early childhood and after school programs that accept child care financial assistance program after July 2024. And at the beginning, I started talking about how the STARS, the quality program, isn't going to be tied to child care financial assistance anymore. And we think that is the right choice from an equity perspective. And we also want to incent and reward programs who are, taking steps to invest in their own continuous quality improvement. So there will be financial incentives for STARS in established on an ongoing basis starting next July. So those are the highlights that I wanted to share with this group. I'm happy to answer more questions, and I'm also happy to turn to UPK stuff if we've got Secretary Boucher with us.
Janet, let's hold questions till the end, and then we'll take on the screen share so you can see everyone, but I am capturing what's coming through the chat.
Okay, great. Okay, oh good, and there's Heather. Okay, sorry, I've got too many things up on my screens. Heather, they were very efficient with their agenda, so I got started early without you, so.
So I hear. Sorry that I was a little late.
I think we're good, because now you're here, and I'm going to turn to the universal pre-kindergarten, or the pre-kindergarten section. And you and I are going to tag team that. So I think you are going to start. Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Heather Boucher, the Interim Secretary of Education. Yes, so we wanted to give you a bit of an update on the activity with respect to the UPK portion of Act 76. Also wanted to note that for folks who aren't aware that there are not any changes happening immediately with respect to UPK that were made in Act 76. Rather, we're actually co-chairing Janet and myself an implementation plan committee to really figure out how best to enact the key principles of Act 76 in a way that makes sense for Vermont. So really want to thank the legislature for giving us some time to work on how best to implement. As I mentioned, this is a new committee that's co-chaired by both myself and Janet as the AOE and AHS designees. And as if you're familiar with Act 76, you'll know that the charge is really to focus on how to implement pre-K as a full school day, full school year program for 4-year-olds, beginning with the 2026-27 school year, in either a public school setting or through the school district by contract with private providers. There's also language in the bill that provides a nod toward figuring out what about our current 3-year-olds who have access to UPK, and what does the future state look like with respect to how we want to best serve our 3-year-olds. We did have our first meeting on July 14th, 2023. Even though we were in a flood emergency, I'm very happy that we were able to carry that out, and I think it was a great meeting. We have a report, an initial report due to the legislature. Not an initial report. We have a report from this particular component due on December 1st, 2024. So a year from this coming December. So that gives you a good sense of the timeline that the legislature has set out for us to do the work within. Next slide. Here is a listing of the members of this implementation plan committee. The roles were largely specified by the legislation, and these are the folks that have been identified as the designees for these particular organizations. We still have one appointment to be made, and that is an appointment by the Secretary of Education for someone from the school-based construction work group, which is another work group on how to come up with a workable plan for reinstating our state school construction fund program. That is co-chaired by AOE and also the Treasurer's Office, and the initial meeting has not started. So once that group has met, I will go ahead and appoint the best person from that working group to this particular committee. I'm not going to go through reading everyone's names. Hopefully this is not a huge surprise for folks. Actually, some updates here. So I know that we do have a representative from the Senate. So I believe that would be the Committee on Committees. I think I saw something come through just before I signed on that we might have a designee from the Speaker of the House. Can't confirm that, but I did see something come through. And I believe that VPA has provided their designee. So again, this is a little outdated, and I apologize. It's because Janet and I are both busy, and I haven't had a chance to connect with her on this. And AOE is doing the logistics of this kind of stuff. So making sure we have the membership set up, warning the meetings, posting the minutes, and those kinds of things. Next. Janet, is this your particular slide, or do you want me to go through this?
I think you can go ahead.
Okay. The one thing I did want to say is that these are formal meetings, and they have to follow state law around open meetings. And so folks are very welcome to come to these meetings. They're posted publicly well in advance of when they are. They're posted on the Agency of Education website. They may also be posted on CDDs, I'm not sure. But I invite anyone from this meeting to come to any of our committee meetings, because you certainly are welcome. And if you have anything you'd like to share on a given day with the committee, there will be space for public comment. And so we would certainly want to hear from other stakeholders than those who are designated committee members. Just wanted to put a plug in there for that. So we're still developing a work plan for this committee. We did have an initial, I would say, mini presentation just to do an initial table set from our good folks and colleagues at NEAR, who gave just a very brief depiction of the status of pre-K in Vermont, also took a look at what pre-K looks like in other states, just a very high level initial, again, table setting exercise. We do plan to hire a consultant to support both the management of the project and then also the facilitation of the meeting. And the large reason for that is that both myself and Janet have, well, I can speak for myself in that I've definitely tried to facilitate meetings as a chair and also participate in said meeting, and that has not gone very well. I think many of you will agree with that if you've ever tried to do that. And so because both Janet and I really need to be involved in the conversations on behalf of our organizations, on behalf of students, on behalf of families, we really wanted to have someone else have the formal job of facilitating the meeting and doing a lot of the project management for that. And we thank the legislature for actually providing us some funds to do so. It's really been helpful. So in addition to that report that I spoke about, which is due in December 24, the implementation plan, we also have a few reports that are due more quickly than that to the legislature. One is a report to the Joint Fiscal Office on the number of pre-K students statewide, what our costs are, and what programs within school districts currently exist. And then we also have a report that focuses on how to determine pupil weight in the school funding formula that's due in December. And we also have, consistent with, because we need to wait and see what comes from the work of the implementation plan committee, AOE also has a directive to provide a model contract for school districts to use, particularly for working and contracting with private providers for the pre-K services. And that's going to be due at the same time as the implementation plan, which makes a lot of sense. We have to actually wait until that work has really started to sugar off in terms of what we're going to recommend to actually have a corresponding model contract for the local level. Next slide.
Yeah. So
you want to go ahead, Janet?
Yeah, well, so that piece, right, so that's sort of like our highest level picture on universal pre-kindergarten. Heather and I have been working closely on that. And then the final piece that we wanted to talk quickly about was accountability and administration, but I know Morgan introduced us with this piece as well. But it did specifically charge Child Development Division and Building Bright Futures working in working together with our other state agency partners to define and measure success and to engage partners and community members. So as Morgan was saying, we already think the first meeting is on the schedule already, and then we will go from there. But again, the goal is to make sure that this is done well, that we're considering what the needs are in the communities, that we're assessing how it's going as it goes along, and that we all have a shared definition of success. So.
Great. Thank you both. If we could pull down the screen share so that we can see each other. So again, to State Advisory Council members, it's a really important opportunity for you to hear directly from Heather and Janet as we're thinking about the start of implementation. And, again, just a quick thank you to the two of them for leading the way and really stepping up with transparency and communication around this piece of new law that we are actively implementing and monitoring together. It's been a really powerful opportunity to have all the information centralized and for the two of you to play a very forward-facing role in implementing and communicating with teams about this. So I want to open it up first to our State Advisory Council members and then to the broader group in the room. But the first question is to you all. What are you most excited about in what you're hearing about implementation, about what we are actually doing under this new law and the intent? What are you most excited about?
I'm happy to say, I do feel like we are putting into place some of the equity related changes that people have been batting around for a long time. So things like the change with the, thinking differently about the STARS program and continuous quality improvement, and how do we incent quality and resource programs for quality. I think that in terms of what we're doing right now, that will make a ton of sense. I'm also excited about what we could do to market the childcare financial assistance side of things in a way that feels, in a way that families can understand what it is and what's being offered and what the benefit is. And, a family at 400% of FPL is like, what do you mean by that? So like, how can we make some of those changes again that people have been thinking about? And again, people have been real busy doing lots of other wonderful things. And I'm hopeful we can keep making progress on those pieces. And related to universal pre-kindergarten, I think the pre-kindergarten, I think UPK has been around for almost 10 years now. It is a reasonable question to say, like, how's it going? What have we learned? What can be changed? And so I think it'll be really interesting to see as we grapple with it as a committee.
Great reflections, Janet. Other SAC members? Flor?
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation, Heather and Janet, too. That was really helpful. What am I the most excited about is that cross communication between all of the partners to really all be focusing and just like rowing forward, not like in a circle. So we are those last sentences, the measure of success and engaging with all of the partners is what I'm most excited about. But I'm also excited from, if I look at my hat of Vermont School Boards Association, is, things like special education services for children, both in public and private settings, like looking at it together, right? And that oversight of the pre-kindergarten system. And I heard both of them talk about, not forgetting about the 3-year-olds, which I think that sometimes we are a little worried in the public education system to forget about them. We know that you're not, and then to really to include the infrastructure part, especially right now after the flood. Like we've been behind in this for a long time. There's just a few things that I'm excited about, and also to remember, the clarity in making things simpler. So I hope that by bringing everybody together, we won't have a dual system, right? Like, so it seems like we have all the ingredients necessary. So I'm super excited.
Thank you, Flor. Others? Go ahead, Jessica.
I would say that I'm excited. I don't know about most excited, but I'm excited that the first meeting happened. And I recognize and am grateful that it happened during the flood, knowing what that's like. As I've been part of the cleanup, I can only imagine what it was like for many of the members. I'm hoping that everybody will make their appointments soon so that we can have the well-rounded group that we had hoped for. And also, I think it's I had no idea. I would have gone to the meeting, but it wasn't simple to find it. So it's good to know that you've got it on your website, and hopefully CDD has it. I just went and looked after you said that, and it wasn't easy. You had to go through quite a few clicks to get to it. So I think it's important that we make it as accessible as we can, so that childcare centers, both home and more of our bigger centers, can send someone if they'd like to be part of the discussion and feel that they shouldn't constantly be looking for it, but might be notified in one way or another. So maybe Building Bright Futures could help us with that as well. But thank you.
Great feedback, Jessica. Accessibility is important, and I'm monitoring the chat, and what that was one of the questions that came through is whether or not there was a web page specifically dedicated for this UPK implementation committee. And so I had a note that it is publicly available on the AOE website, and that there will be space for public comment, but we can also support communication about what that looks like in a strategic way. Any other SAC members have reflections on what you're most excited about before we transition into questions? All right, I'm going to transition. Oh, go ahead, Eddie.
Oh, I'm excited about Heather and Janet taking this on with great exuberance. And so it's great to see the leadership from the two agencies coming together like that.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. So I'm going to go through some of the questions in the chat. If other folks have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll move through for either Janet or Heather, or just to be posed with the broader State Advisory Council, and everyone can feel free to come off of the screen or onto your Zoom screen. So the first question was, how do the CCFAP changes in payment rates overlap or align with the new federal regulations regarding payment rates?
So what I think the answer is that the existing, the interpretation that the Office of Child Care has been using, that I think is now sort of coming through in sort of the new proposed regulations, is, has been, there's sort of been the market rate version as a way to set payments for childcare programs, but you can also look at cost of care, and that, and what do we think is the true cost of care of delivering the service. And that the feds have been a little, they haven't been specifically really precise about that, because partially because like nobody actually has enough money to invest to actually truly get to the full, what we truly think is the true cost of high quality. Even with these great investments in Vermont, everybody recognizes we're still not quite there yet. But because our plan was informed by a cost of care study and has a clear connection to it, the Federal Office of Child Care said, okay, that makes sense. And you're clearly using a cost of care methodology to set your to determine what your rates are. And so that's what they've decided for now. And then coming forward, one of the other things that was in the law that I didn't touch on was that the legislature has asked DCF and the Joint Fiscal Office, the legislative, financial office, to work together in the next 6 months to look at how as a state should we be thinking about updating the rates, updating weekly cost shares on a regular basis, so that it doesn't require like legislative intervention every time you want to increase the rates. So I think that's going to be another place where we need to look at what is the guidance that's coming from the federal government on that. So Claire, tell me if that started to answer your question or not, or if it didn't. I'm happy to talk more.
Completely did. Thank you
Okay.
so much, and I appreciate that so much.
Thank you. All right, the second question I believe you both addressed, but just wanting to make sure. There were questions about whether or not the seats for the family home providers and the center-based pre-K providers were appointed yet, and if not, what the process is. And I believe what you said is there are 3 appointments that have not been made: the school-based construction work group appointment, the pre-qualified pre-K provider, and the family child care provider, or sorry, the private provider seats, and that those are appointments by different members within the legislature. Okay. Heather, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm used to Teams. I got confused for a moment. I believe the one that is, and I forget which is which, but the one that was under the jurisdiction of the Senate has been appointed. And again, as I said, I just saw an email indicating that perhaps the one from the House has also been designated. I'll have more on that once I actually am able to check my email. And then the only one that is not, to my knowledge, that is not appointed is the one from the school-based construction fund committee, which that committee has not met. So you can't really appoint someone if the committee has not been pulled together in a formal way yet.
Thank you.
Janet, is that consistent with your understanding as well?
Yes, and it's consistent with what you said earlier, so that works.
All right, and the last question that came through in the chat was whether or not the UPK committee expects that previous research and reports on Vermont's implementation of universal pre-K will be utilized in helping our understanding and framing of the new system.
Oh, from my perspective, yes. I mean, I think we, as a state, we invested in that research, and I think it gives us a really good baseline to understand what some of the gaps are in terms of UPK services. So I think it's a good question. And I think, the first meeting really was just more of a table setting. And so I think as we get into more of the meat of the implementation, those will be really important pieces that will be provided to the committee. And there have been a series of them, which I know Claire is very familiar with. Janet,
Agreed.
anything you'd add? Sorry,
No,
Morgan.
go ahead, Janet. All good.
Oh, sorry, Heather, you were going to finish. You were going to finish what you were saying.
No, I just said it. Was there anything else you'd add to that?
Anything for me to add? Okay, great. Sorry. So no, I mean, I think just the fact that we had the reason we had Near right out of Rutgers come and present is because we did want to put Vermont's work in context and have people, make sure that the committee was, that there was a sense that we are fourth in the nation in access right now for 4-year-olds. We're second in the nation in access for 3-year-olds, and so. That there are standards and research available on the national level. This is how Vermont compares in terms of quality standards. So to make sure that, so our goal is to sort of wrap the discussion in what the existing research is. And we made time at the end of the meeting too. Morgan was able to offer just a little bit of the summary of all the, BBF did an awesome summary of all of the pre-K stuff for this legislative session that I think will be a great resource.
Perfect. Thank you all. I know we are at time, so I just want to honor folks' time and recognize that we are happy to monitor any questions you have. If you want to pop any in the chat as we are transitioning out of our meeting, please do that. We're happy to elevate those to agency leaders. We also have a space on our on our website for emerging questions and priorities. I believe there's also an email that Janet's team is monitoring at all times related to this specific piece of, I keep wanting to say legislation, the new law that is in place that you can use. So if you navigate to their website, I'm going to look to someone on my team to put that in the chat. They are centralizing so much information and kind of keeping the public up to date on the status of the law and the implementation of the body of work. And as there are opportunities to be engaged in the work in any way, shape, or form, we will publicly disseminate those as well. And the last thing I wanted to mention before we close with this group is that we are in the process of developing policy recommendations for the State Advisory Council network right now. So if you have not been actively engaged in some of our strategic plan committees, these next couple of months are really important times to be active members of those different groups. We use so much information, data, regional council priorities, the policy recommendations from previous years, the emerging priorities that are coming on behalf of all of the partners in the system to create a really robust set of policy recommendations coming into each legislative session. So we will be bringing those forward at the October meeting for a vote. So if you have not been involved in that work, please make sure that you are actively talking with each of your different strategic plan committees and your regional councils. And Matt, I'm seeing your note about pre-K meetings. We will disseminate pre-K meetings as broadly as possible through a range of different channels. So thank you all for coming to our July SAC meeting again. Really important opportunity for everyone to come together, hear about flood response, to hear about implementation of Act 76, but also to hear about family leadership and to be thinking critically within your own organizations, within your bodies of work. How are you promoting and providing opportunities to partner with families, to elevate family voice? And I just want to say again, thank you to our family leads. Thank you to Anna and Tanya, who have been supporting that work at BBF. I'm really proud of that scope and that trip, or those series of trips to DC. So thank you all, and we will see you back in September. Have a great afternoon.